Delighted that we are hosting this really important event. This is being led by the Disability and Development Working Group, and the chairs have done immense work in bringing everything together today. But I just wanted to make a note of a couple of things. This is really one of the first occasions where we have a speaker from the Irish disability movement. So we're delighted that Claire Kenny is joining us from Independent Living Movement Ireland. So that is really great that here in Dóchas that we are also really engaging with those here involved in the disability sector here in Ireland. It's also brilliant that we have such international speakers joining us today, particularly Bonfas Massa. I know James will introduce everybody properly, but also Ednar Miloska as well from CBM Global. So we're delighted that we have the opportunity to take advantage of the fact that they are here in Dublin to engage with us and to join this really important webinar. And I think it's important to say there's a number of people registered today, and we are really happy that we have a number of people joining from around the world as well. I think it shows that we really are keen, not only here in Dóchas, to look at how we can support knowledge and information sharing across our network in Ireland, but particularly with our members partners, with those who are working in the global south as well, who can also, who hopefully will find this webinar very beneficial and can learn a lot from it. And lastly, I think there is a growing interest here in Ireland, and particularly amongst Dóchas members, of engaging in a conversation on disability, inclusion and disabled person organisations as well. And I'm really delighted that here's an opportunity today to really kick that off in a meaningful way. So a big thank you to the chairs. And with that, I'll hand back over to you, James. But I hope, thank you all for joining, and I hope you find this a very good and engaging session as well. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jen. Really appreciate that. Just a little bit of housekeeping, folks, if we can, to kick things off. I know nobody likes rules, but we have to have a couple. This session is going to be recorded, so you can always catch it again. So that's one thing. The second thing is there is subtitles and closed captions available if you do need them. And the third thing is that we're going to keep the chat function kind of quiet if we can while we're recording the session until we go to the questions and answers in about 30 minutes, purely because if people with visual impairments are using screen readers, sometimes it pops up and it can interfere with their audio. So if we could do that, that'd be wonderful. We really appreciate that. So thank you so much, everybody. I'm going to introduce my speakers. We're going to have a series of 3 questions, and then we're going to open the questions to the audience in about 30 minutes. And my colleague Leah, who is behind the camera here and is doing fantastic work for the last few months, sterling work, is ready there to give us a shout when they come in. So I'd just like to introduce our 3 speakers here today. We're very lucky, and it's kind of quite surreal to be in the room with our speakers I've seen in 2D for the last while. We have Ednar from CBM. This is Ednar here, if you want to raise your hand, just to show where you are. We have Bonfas from Malawi, and we've Claire here from Isle of Mai. So, Ednar, I'd like to ask you the first question. Can you just talk a little bit about your work and a little bit about your experience in Kenya and how that works?
Yeah, thank you very much, James. As introduced, I'm Edna Musyoka. I work with CBM Global Disability Inclusion. I am based in Nairobi, and our work as CBM as an organization, we work with organizations alongside persons with disabilities, and we're working in about 20 countries, and we work a lot to invest in a long-term, authentic relationship with organizations with disability movements. And so our work involves around collaborations, partnership, a lot to do with the communities, persons with disability themselves, organizations of persons with disability, what we commonly call here as a disabled persons organization. We do a lot of consultative engagement with government agencies, and also other stakeholders, because our work involves looking at long-term sustainability, community engagement. So that is what we do.
And what specifically is your area in Kenya?
My work involves around partnership engagement, a lot of designs, project designs, and also, reporting documentation and facilitative roles when it comes to, capacity engagement, capacity sharing activities with other stakeholders, DPOs, OPDs, what we call organizations of persons with disabilities. So that generally, in a brief, that's what my work involves.
Super.
Yeah.
Thanks very much, Anna. And Bon, thank you very much. You're very welcome from Malawi. Could you tell us a wee bit about Standing Voice and about your work yourself from Malawi?
Yeah, so I'm one place, as you said, Masa. I'm the executive director for Standing Voice Malawi, but we are in international NGO. We're also working in other countries like Tanzania. We have a strong focus on human rights, a holistic approach towards the rights of persons with albinism. Maybe across the world, you have read and seen how people with albinism have been targeted for harmful practices and ritual killings. So the organization has been really focusing on supporting organization of persons with albinism across Africa and even globally, collaborating with them, and even other local NGOs collaborating with them on the work on the promoting rights of people with albinism. So my work really has been championing this. I come from a very strong OPD background. I read the albinism movement in Malawi for more than 9 years as the president of the association, and I've really interacted with almost 80% of our associations of persons with albinism in Africa. So I've really, I think, focused much on how do we work as partners, but also ensuring that we strengthen our voice as people with albinism. So Standing Voice has a strong focus on a skin cancer prevention program, where we help to deal with the issues of cancer for persons with albinism. We also have a strong pillar where we're doing advocacy work, voice of people with albinism at policy level, both national and international. But also we work closely with victims of torture, where we have really focused much on trauma management, psychosocial support, and also well-being of parents and relatives of children with albinism. So really, this is a way that we have seen quite a lot of change across our partnership and collaboration with governments and the civil society organization across Africa.
Thanks very much, Bon. That's tremendous. And it's wonderful to be here. So, and lastly, I never introduced myself. I'm James Casey that works for CBM. I'm just not a random guy. And lastly, continuing the international field of the day, we have Claire Kenny from Exotic Longford. Claire, would you like to say a little bit about who you are and what ILMI does?
Hi everyone, I'm delighted to be here. I'm Claire Kenny from ILMI. ILMI is a Disabled Persons Organisation, or DPO, as defined under the United Nations Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities. We work with and for disabled people, by disabled people. We have a clear vision and objective, and the vision is that in all policy development that affects our lives, we are directly consulted and included in that work. So that's...
Can you tell a little bit how ILMI has developed over the last 5 years, just to give people a little bit of a background of, DPOs in Ireland?
Yeah. So DPOs in Ireland are a generally new phenomenon. Well, they've become more actively known, but we work on strategies and policy development. We collaborate with disabled people, and we get into groups and organize collectively and come up with solutions that affect change, and slowly the governmental policies are reflecting that, strategies.
And we'll come into that in a second. Thanks a million, Claire. Claire is the policy person with ILMI at the moment. So I disclaimer, I used to work with Claire in my old job, so I'm only messing Claire about Longford. Longford's a beautiful county. It's got centre parks. So First question, partnership. I think this is a very important thing. The whole world is talking about how do we create a new pact for the future? How do we move forward with multilateralism, which is everyone agreeing to the same things? There seems to be a sort of a strain on many social contracts throughout the world in various areas. And we seem to be going to a space which is more regional variations. And, there's different ways of doing things that are not necessarily bad. They're just different ways of doing things. And this might be a good thing on the way forward. So starting with you, Edna, I just want to ask you, like from your own perspective, working in the field, and you do, and from CBM Kenya, what does partnership mean to you? How is that held in regard? How does that work in CBM Kenya?
Okay, for us as partnership, for me and as CBM Global, partnership means fostering collaborative relationship. And this is based on mutual trust, respect, and also commonality of goals. So, and this one, we work with a disabled persons organization. We are working with development organization. We are working with other stakeholders, including community members themselves. So that is generally what partnership means to us. And so for CBM Global particularly, and in Kenya, our work is founded on partnership. For instance, one of our core values, it's about embracing partnership, where we say we collaborate with other stakeholders. We are learning from each other, we are flexible, and we are responsive to the changes that we're seeing. And at CBM Global, we have our areas of distinctiveness. And one of it is that we are a development organization and humanitarian organization. So we are dual mandate organization. The other area of our distinctiveness, and that pertains partnership, it's authentic partnership with disability movements. And in that, we look at 3 areas. And number one, we're talking about advocacy, where we work with organizations of persons. We call them in Kenya organization of persons with disabilities. We use it interchangeably. So we work with DPOs and or OPDs, to advocate for persons' rights of persons with disability. And in terms of advisory, the information we get from OPDs and the persons with disability really inform the work that we do in the field, because we work in the poorest areas, regions. And then in terms of our field programs, it is tailored. Our work is tailored to engage, to ensure that there's inclusive participation of persons with disabilities and community members at large. So that is what defines partnership. Also in our work at CBM, we reference our work to some global frameworks. We have CRP, United Nations Conventions on the Rights of Persons with Disability. And UN's RCPD talks about inclusive participation. And how do we do this? This is where we go to the field and do mapping on this case for DPOs, and they inform our work because they are quite knowledgeable, they are skilled, they have valuable insights that really shape our work. So for CRPD, we align to that. And also SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, really guide our work. You see, Sustainable Development Goals number 17. It's all about partnership, and specifically Goal 17.7 that talks about public-private, partnership. It has the overarching aspect of multi-sectoral engagement. So that really informs a lot of work that we do in the community.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Edna. I'm going to come back to what you were saying there about bringing the CRPD, which is the Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities, onto a local level. I'm going to come back to you again about that. But on the same question to you about partnerships, how does Standing Voice approach partnerships, and the importance of it to you?
Yeah, I think picking up from where Edna stopped, I would want to focus much on the words just used in terms of trust.
Yeah.
If we start looking at partnership from an angle of trust, I work in a sector where, as I said, we have been persecuted from all angles, from birth to death, and we're still struggling with the whole issue of whiteness in the context of African setup. And if you look at those elements and trust, and also my background as civil society organizations, then we definitely need to work with government. We definitely need to work with other civil society organizations. But the big thing around partnership in our context on issues of albinism is whom do we trust? And then that brings a lot of challenge to really right now create that partnership. Because sometimes you can't trust the criminal justice system because they are not protecting you enough. You can't trust your community because that's why you have been killed. So it's really, I think, a difficult thing for me to define partnership in that context. If we look at issues of albinism, because it's something that we're really struggling. The second part around the partnership is to try to look at it from the angle of the sensitivity and relationship, like the diversity that is there among persons with disabilities. So really, are we addressing partnership from an angle of addressing the needs of people with disabilities? In our case, we have seen partnership from the angle, maybe working in one sector. If we talk about access to health right for people with albinism, yes, we are doing fine, because maybe the government has hospitals. But even within that partnership, we may say they may have hospitals, but they don't have sunscreen. So it means the partnership is not complete. So these are things I think that we're still struggling when we define partnership. And there's still a lot of work, I think, that we need to keep on reflecting what it does really partnership mean for us. So for me, I'll look at partnership probably at this moment, it's more or less in our head. It hasn't really translated into our heart. So until we reach a level where this partnership has really translated into our heart, as development partners, as civil society, as government, that will really translate into enjoyment of rights of people with disability. Otherwise, we're still a long way to define what really partnership means to us as people with disabilities, even our diverse needs as people with disabilities.
Super, Bon. I'm going to come back to you about that. Lots of interesting points. There, build on that. Build on that in the sense that what Bon was saying there about, and Edna, trusting with other organisations to build partnership. What's ILMI? How do you feel that's built up with ILMI? Not trusted and built up?
No, one of our strategic aims is collective empowerment, and in that we want to build collectively, but also we recognise the intersectionality of impairment, and that your impairment intersects with other civil society movements. So we build partnership with, say, women's rights, LGBT rights, and climate change. So that's very important. I suppose partnership is important as well because I suppose to progress the rights of disabled people, we need to bring allies along with us, and we need to bring the government, we need to move from consultation to co-creation of policies, and that's the only way forward to build partnership.
I'm just going to ask you a follow-up question on that. You talked about climate change, and this is something that I suppose I have a keen awareness of, because it was always something we took. We are very important to kind of took to our hearts that we have to build allyship within the wider civil society outside of the disability sector. Can you give an example of that, of something you've done on climate change, say, with the eco-feminist group or something?
Yeah, so I was part of the feminist community, Justice for Climate Change, and I'm also part of the SDG, a National Stakeholder Forum, and I'm a stakeholder, or a committee member in that, so I bring the collective disability lens to discussions.
And that's key, isn't it? Collective disability lens.
Yeah.
Super. Thanks a million, Claire. I'm going to come back to you again, and that's wonderful. There's lots of things. I'm going to flow off that thing again. I mean, let's go with this. So, Bon, you talked about trust. Edna, is that something you find when you're at the cold face? You're talking about applying the CRPD, the principles of that, which is a tremendous document, the UN rights on the Convention of People with Disabilities. It's a wonderful document. It's 20 years old nearly. And you're talking about how when you're out in the fields in your mental health program, you're applying those principles and values from that at a local level with local DPOs. Can you give an example of how that might work practically on a local level?
Yes, so I can give an example of a project that is mental health project that is funded by Irish Aid. And in this project, one of the principles, we can say, and in partnership with how we engage OPDs or DPOs, it's accessibility. And that is one of the principles for CRPD. So how do we ensure that we partner with DPOs? Number one is to remove barriers, because most of the time when we are co-creating, we say we are co-creating projects, but there are so many barriers that they will not be able to make. But for us as CBM, we look at simple things, even on the meeting rooms.
Yeah.
Where is everyone? Can they be able to access? What are the barriers that we can remove? You know, in terms of the materials we are using, in terms of the technology. So that is accessibility. The other thing, a principle for CRPD is non-discrimination. And here, you know, like in terms of mental health, people, that is one category that has been discriminated over the time, or rather people don't talk about it most. So we actually are intentional about bringing everyone on board. CBM is strongly known for, you know, authentic partnership with disability movement, and we take seriously the statement that says nothing for us without us. And so we involve, even if someone will not be able to, you know, contribute by themselves, then we give them that opportunity. And we're not talking about just involvement, it's meaningful engagement, where we co-create projects with OPDs, with DPOs, and ensure that they are not only limited at the creation bit, but they are throughout project intervention, you know, in terms of monitoring, implementation. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. That's great, Edna. It's great to hear that view from someone that's working on the space that outside of an urban area, because a lot of the time when we think of development with disabled people, it's always in an urban area. But of course, most of us don't live in cities. We live in villages and towns. But can I ask something similar to you, but slightly different? It's about how can we build up that trust with stakeholders, with partners from DPO, OPD, PWA angle? How can they learn from, what do they need to bring to the table to make sure that that trust is maintained, or even there's a beginning of a trust relationship?
Yeah, I think well, we talked about CRPD.
Yeah.
And we all know CRPD has a strong element of the role of OPDs, element of self-representation. They are very strong, and we're so glad about that. But I think to answer your question, I would start looking at it from maybe appreciating that people with disabilities over time, individually, we have really contributed to that element of self-representation. But also collectively through our OPDs, we have contributed to that element of self-representation. But I think the big question, if we try now to address the issue of trust, is to what extent we have been represented. But also, I want to bring to the attention of this discussion to around do we really understand the leaving no one behind concept? Because for me, we have a long way to achieve that. It's a very brilliant concept around it. But if we are very honest as funders, as partners, as government, are we really going to achieve the leaving no one behind? And if you just take that and put it with all the principles of CRPD, you still see that we are still being left behind as persons with disabilities. So I think that's a long way to go. But through this process, I think of engagement, make sure that the few people with disabilities who are there, they're still being engaged continuously, building the voice through the OPDs, which I've seen, I think, working with OPDs, we have seen a decline in the voice of people with disabilities. It's also about intergenerational transformation. Are we really investing into OPD so that there is that transformation from the young generation to the elder generation? Because you may see that most of the movement started way back. Now we have so many young people who are not joining the movement. But CRPD gives us that flexibility. There must be transition in our voice. So what I've seen, I think, in terms of trust is we still trust the old people, the founders of this movement. We are not trusting the young people. People like us and the new generation with disability, they are not being trusted enough. We still want to go back to the old people who crafted the CRPD, which was brilliant. But now that generation transformation, that thinking, the co-creation she was talking about, we need to bring this young voice, young thought, young experts who can then move with the movement. That will help us to create trust and even participation and self-representation.
That's wonderful. And you know what, I'm just going to add to that you're talking from the Kenya perspective, you're talking from the Malawi perspective or African perspective. I'd just like to add that the issues that affect disabled people or people with disabilities across the world, the context may be different. The issues are always the same. I met a friend of mine. Friend of mine is in Zimbabwe, or no, Zambia. He's got a young DPO organization, Ian Banda, if he's watching. I remember Ian saying to me, "It's always about presentation. It's never about representation. We're presented. People are doing stuff for us, but we're never actually given true agency ourselves."
Yeah.
Is that something that ILMI has found in Ireland? We were taking arms against a massive sea of troubles, were they?
Yeah. We were always consulted, but at the end of, but the policy was always established before, before disabled people were involved. And that really needs to change. We need to look at the way policy is developed, and it needs to be developed first and foremost with disabled people. Because that's the only way that will make policy accessible, will make it apt for disabled people. Include them from the start.
But why do disabled people? Why do you think disabled? Do you think disabled people will offer solutions to problems that affect them?
Yeah, because they have a unique experience of impairment that non-disabled people just don't have. And that's fundamentally important, and it really develops policy into that it's inclusive for everyone.
Yeah, and it's important because policy, it's all right, policy is not the most exciting or sexy thing in the world, but it is something that we live our lives by. And policy is, if you have a good policy that's built with the people it affects, then you're going to have, better outcomes, you're going to have a healthier society, a happier society. And I think that's key to that, because again, we need to move away from, in any type of policy, if this is aid, development, I'm saying about the CRPD. CRPD is a wonderful document. It's 20 years old though, but it's a living document. It's something that evolves. It's not something that's permanent. So it's interesting what you were saying about young people, and I'm actually going to lead on that one now, about bringing new voices in. Edna, Kenya's, I've worked in Kenya, and I met you in Kenya, just full disclosure too, and I mean, there's a vibrant DPO OPD movement there in East Africa and Africa across the board. The young population. Do you find that young people, the young disabled people, or people with young, mental health, emotional distress things, are more aware of their rights? They're more inclined to kind of go, they want to change things collectively, or do you feel that they're somehow disappointed in how things are going?
Thank you for that question. But before I answer that, I wanted to add something about the trust.
Yeah, go for it.
The trust, how we are doing it in Kenya. How do we build on trust? When we are identifying or mapping OPDs and other stakeholders, we go in as partners, as that is the approach we take in Kenya, in CBM Global Kenya. So we don't go as, top down. So we go in as partners. I try to identify what are the issues and what are the areas we can collaborate and where can we complement each other. So that really elevates trust. Yeah, so I was talking about how we elevate trust in our daily work back in the community. So we maintain transparency, open communication. In that, when we are designing, co-creating a project, every information is available to the OPDs, DPOs you're working with, and other stakeholders, because some of them have complained previously that they do not know what other stakeholders are doing. They're only used to get the information and that's it. But for us, our approach is different. They are involved, very well informed of what our goals and the budgets and what we want to do, everything. And they are involved right from the start and throughout inclusive project cycle management. The other thing we do to enhance trust, we go in as partners. So it's not like we are here and they are here. Yeah. It's not top down. We go in as partners so we can be able to see what is it that we can complement each other. What are the gaps we can work through together? Because one of the challenges back in Kenya, we have with most of OPT is that the issues of governance is the issues of structure, infrastructure, even having like a setup office. So we start from there, and that's how we're building the movement. And now to your question on whether the youth are involved, I was saying that they are very much involved. Some of them have registered their own OPD movement and networks for that matter. So they are meaningfully involved, and there's been a lot of awareness on human rights. So they are taking this up, as you can even know that we were demonstrating the other day, and persons with disability, in media everywhere. So very much vibrant movement. And back in the country, all our projects, we have component of OPDs, very much involved, and they are not only involved at, give us information. No, they're taking leading roles in those projects, whether it's on inclusive health, whether it's in community-based development, whether it's, in community mental health projects that we have, they are taking leading role and meaningfully engaged. So when we are doing monitoring, they are part of the team. When we are doing recording, in fact, and also a lot is going on in terms of capacity development initiatives for those organizations. And we are learning. We learn from them, they learn from us. It's not one way.
That's perfect. That's a good point. Thank you so much, and thank you for repeating yourself, Edna. I appreciate that. It was great. We apologize about that, but that's life. But that was wonderful. Bon, I'm going to jump on that. I mean, just go from that question, and then I'll just ask one final question after Claire goes in. So what Edna was saying there about the importance of partnership and how it works locally. Do you coming from a perspective of your organization and across your wide experience, you have to have local partners.
To strengthening the local partnership. That's what I'm saying. If you look at the issues of urbanism, it's relatively a minority group. And if it's a DPO that is a minority group, the only thing that you can read, make sure your voice is heard, is through partnership. So really one thing is to make sure that this partnership is not just vertical, but also there's that horizontal partnership. So people with albinism were affected by, for example, she was talking about climate change. Is our voice very strong in climate change sector? So civil society are already in climate change. We need to be in that space because we get the sun. We are affected by the sun and the heat and all that. That affects. It's a climate change thing. Then if you look at civil society, who are already working in the space of access to health, access to education, access to employment, we can also be there. So bringing in the young voices, I think, at that vertical, horizontal level is very important. So I think that's why I was looking at the issue of self-representation as also very key. I have had in forums where I sit there and people would ask you, are you white or black? So the moment you start asking those questions, then you provide guidance, you provide clarification, people understand you, and then they are able to support you. So I think collaboration, partnership at local level is very strong to amplify our voice, but also make sure people understand our issues, not just as an issue, but as a human rights issue that they need to take up and address it.
Thank you. And I'm going to mention something about the African Albinism Network towards the end and the petition, because I think it's wonderful. Claire, the question for you, and I'll phrase it in a way that's probably local, because we're talking about localized solutions. So Ireland, I mean, we've adopted the CRPD. It's government policy that the CRPD is going to be throughout all government departments, and that includes the DFA, and that will include our development. How do you see it? How do you see, like, for instance, ILMI's experience of engaging with co-collaboration of policy and the importance of having that localized voice, like the localized idea of local county DPOs in Ireland, to making grassroots movements meaningfully engage and with the policymakers?
Yeah, ILMI are very active in developing local DPOs in a number of counties throughout Ireland. I suppose ILMI is the central organisation, or the national organisation, but we have a whole pile of satellite DPOs that will tackle or that will communicate with local county councils and local structures to amplify the voice locally, and then the local issues will go up nationally, and then vice versa. It's kind of a loop.
And it's the great thing about that is that, I mean, I've noticed that. So for instance, underpinning what the DPOs have done in this country, and many of our colleagues in the global south, the DPOs are way ahead of us in terms of policy and in terms of development, maybe not resources, but we underlying what we've done as disabled people in this country, and I am a disabled person, even though I'm not like working for any DPO, is that we always come from it from the angle of disability equality, which is not disability awareness. It's looking at us from the point of the CRPD and looking at disability as an interaction between your impairment, what functionally seems different, and the environment and environmental attitudes.
Yeah.
Do you think that's something that ILMI has always worked into their work?
Yeah, and I suppose an example of a DPO is Sligo DPO, and how they operate. They did a series of navigating ordinary things in ordinary spaces, and that highlighted to Sligo County Council, you know, the issues that locally affect disabled people in Sligo, you know, which is really impactful, you know, at a local level.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much, Claire. That was really, I'm going to go to the last question really quickly to everyone, and then we're going to open up to maybe the audience to see if there's any questions. This is a wonderful conversation, but it's the start of a dialogue. It's not the end, it's the start of a dialogue for us within the development place in Ireland. Edna, how would you advise stakeholders, governments, partners, partnerships or whatever, how would you advise them to effectively engage with OPD's DPOs? What are a couple of key points that you think are important to take into account?
I would say they should be engaged early, DPOs. For instance, in our co-creation initiatives, we have a whole project on DPOs that are doing different things, but the central thing they are doing, all of them, it's advocacy, but each have economic and other things that they are doing. So involve them early. Do not maybe start the project and then you realize, oh, we needed to have them. Have them from the initial start. And the other thing is look at what are the gaps, and work with the DPOs to mitigate those gaps. Don't leave them out because there are gaps and you're saying we want already established ones. In our low resource setup in a developing country, if you look at which DPO is at par, you may not get most of them, and therefore we will not live to the statement of not leaving anyone behind. So I'll talk about engaging them early, and also working together to work on the gaps that they may have. Yeah, learning from each other.
Super. I'm going to just jump out of the queue and go Claire, and then I'm going to Boniface. So Claire, what do you think is what can you say to, you know, we've a very audience here of development organizations, government bodies, individuals. What can you say to them about tips? Can they give them pointers to say engaging with DPOs before they start a process of doing it?
Yeah, the same as what Edna was saying, which is engage with us early. That's fundamentally important, and I suppose not even throughout the process, you know, the implementation and the monitoring is also important.
Cool. That's the point, because sometimes it stops at consultation and co-creation, and then it's like, that's fine now, the policy is done, off you go. But unless you're actually monitoring how that policy is going with a meaningful engagement. Cool. And Bon, just to you, what do you think from your experience? Any advice or, I suppose, suggestions you can have that could help people start this process of engaging with DPOs? Because for many, it's a new process of engaging with DPOs. There's a lot of talk about it. It hasn't translated, perhaps, you know?
Yeah, I think there are quite a couple of things. First, I think I'm a strong believer of leadership.
Yeah.
So working, I think, from as Edna said, from a OPD point of view, really we need to first start investing in leadership of OPD so that their voice is very strong and solid. But also all these issues of accountability, self-accountability, even our persons with disability ourselves, I think that's very important. Secondly, I'll look at issues of investment. I think if we look at the pattern of government partners, we have been looking at disability as an issue. So, but I think our investment should really focus on the transformation. even ourselves as development partners, as government, are we really being transformed in terms of our stigma, our biasness towards disabilities? So I know for so many years we've been talking about mainstreaming, but are we really achieving that mainstreaming? Because mainstreaming was a strategy that really opens up for different needs of people with disabilities. We are women, we are girls, we are children, we are men, we are older persons. So if you start addressing all that using a mainstreaming strategy, it will also be very useful for all of us to benefit from the human rights approach towards disability. But interesting, I think if I look at the albinism specifically, because that's our core business, a standing voice. So we have really tried to use the holistic approach. So we make sure when we work, we do our work, we try to understand all this diversity. And she talked about intersectionality that is there, so that at least we don't leave anyone, whether you are an older person with albinism, you're a young person with albinism, we make sure you are supported throughout our program. The mental issues that we go throughout day in and day out, we also try to address all those issues, mental health issues, sexual reproductive issues, climate change issues, food issues, health issues. So at the end of the day, you're looking at a person with a disability or albinism from a holistic angle, and then you create a platform for them to enjoy their rights like anyone else.
Thank you so much, Bon. And I just want to put in one quick thing. I'll bring in a second, Bender. I want to mention that the African Albinos in Neckmerk have a wonderful petition in which we're trying, and we're supporting for this, everyone is jumping. We're trying to get sunscreen and the proper type of sunscreen on the WHO's list of essential medicines. It brings in human rights, it brings in climate change, it brings in partnership. And we're going to have a seminar on that soon. Bono, I've seen you again at that. So thank you so much. Do you want to come in, Edna, or really quickly, and then we go for a question from the audience?
I wanted to add on two things. Why they should organizations should work in collaboration with DPOs, and it's because they have the local knowledge, the contextual knowledge, and therefore they have this information that can shape the work that will to be done on the ground. Then the other thing is, if we're looking at sustainability, then it's important to have DPOs on board, because they're deeply rooted in the community. They come from the community. They have support of the community. So you see the projects we do, it's just for some period, but now after the project and the DPOs still remain there. So the sustainability and also advocacy bit, because you're talking about, increasing awareness around human rights and, ensuring that the human rights are practiced, they are entrenched in the policies and all other frameworks. So that is the one of the roles that they do very well. So we have to do that. Then if we're looking at advocacy, DPOs have to be involved very
definitely well. And they have to be involved from a point of agency, so it's not just advocating on their behalf, but it's agency, which is disabled people speaking for ourselves, and it's supporting to do the whatever that form that takes. So I'm conscious of the time, because it's Friday and everyone's thinking about their lunch, but I also want to open up to the audience and see if there's any questions. First of all, thank you so much, guys. It's been really wonderful, and this is the start of a dialogue. This is the start of a conversation. This is not a new way of doing things. We've been doing this for 50 years. We've always done this. Again, but it's a way that perhaps the wider sector of the international community can learn about. How do you bring people along? You bring people along by talking to collective movements, and then you build policy around that, you build aid around that, you build development around that. And then that means that people are democratically have an ownership of what we all are in our social structures. So I'm just wondering, Leah, is there anyone there with a question?
Yeah, I see one hand up here from Shirlene.
Shirlene. Hi, Shirlene. We'll unmute you there.
Hi, James. Hi, Claire. Hi, Bonfessing. Hi, Edna. Also, hi, everybody else. Can you hear me?
We can hear you perfectly. Shirlene, where are you?
I am from Kenya. Edna, how are you? Thank you so much for representing us. And my name is Tunai Shalin. I am the founder of Ana Antami, which is an albinism organization here in Kenya that empowers individuals with albinism to integrate into society. So Ana Antami means I belong. And honestly, I really love this conversation. I love this dialogue that you have brought here. And even the title, presentation to representation. And so my questions are just going to be aligned to that. I'm
Okay.
sorry, is it okay if I ask the questions I have instead of coming in and out, since you're also running out of time?
Go for it, Charlene, go.
Okay, there are 4 questions, basically.
Okay,
So,
we might keep them a little bit slower if that's okay. We'll give you 1 or 2. How's that?
Okay. So many organizations tend to rely on established methods when addressing challenges faced by persons with disability. So in your experience, either Edna, Claire, or Boniface, how can you avoid pitfalls using outdated approaches to solve emerging issues? Or what innovative strategies have you seen successfully integrate the wisdom of traditional practice while addressing the modern day needs? So also Boniface just mentioned that we are using the CRPD right now, but those were written by people who literally, I would say that those were already written by people for a while, and now we have a new generation that is coming in, and you're facing different challenges or different problems, but we're also still following the CRPD. So I would just like to know what has worked and what needs to be changed.
Charlene, thanks very much. And I'm going to direct that right, well, Boniface, I'm going to direct that to you. What has worked and what needs to be changed?
Yeah, I think in terms of what has worked, we all agree as people with disability, the principles that are there in CRPD, they are very great, and they're still working.
Yeah.
I think from my experience, I think what is still struggling is maybe giving a critical focus on those principles.
Yeah.
For example, when you talk about reasonable accommodation, what does it mean now? And in different contexts, as you rightly say, because if I'm in Europe, today I did apply my sunscreen. But when I'm back in Malawi tomorrow, I need to wear my sunscreen every day for the rest of my life. And that's the reality of now, the reasonable accommodation. So I think there are some principles in the CRPD which in different contexts, they are very difficult to achieve them. So that I think is what we are struggling. But we totally agree that there are principles that are there. They are very good principles. And that's why now we're calling upon development partners, even our government, when they create these laws, are they really focusing on these principles and then translating them into meaningful transformation for persons with disability in their context? Because that's another thing as well. So I wouldn't say I have a straightforward answer, but it's something that the voice of DPOs now becomes very relevant. So if we're in Europe, let the movement speak out. If we're in Africa, let the African context, people with disability stand up and voice out, so that then they can change national level laws and then stick to the principles that are there in the CRPD.
Yeah, and what do you think about that, Claire? I mean, the thing that the CRPD is underlying. It's a wonderful document, but it's a wonderful, but it's also, it's been thrown around like it's a lottery ticket that it's going to solve all the problems. How can the CRPD be pushed into a local, like, how can that be made real? How can people use that properly in conjunction with disabled people? Or do we need a new dialogue?
We need to include disabled people to make this real and to make it apt. We need to. It's kind of the same problem. We need to go directly to disabled people. We in Ireland, historically they used to go to service providers or individual disabled people to ask for advice or to comment on disabled people's issues. That needs to change. We need to go directly to disabled people. Like, I suppose disabled people individually are great. They can advocate for themselves, but they don't have the all-round holistic
democratic
cross impairment disabled person's perspective.
And that's important. I think the importance is that it's so you look at collective movements and you look at a new way of doing it. I mean, we don't talk to men's rights groups about women's issues. No, we go to women's groups. We should be talking to, if we want to know about how do we build partnerships with African DPOs in the Global South, we talk to African DPOs in the Global South. We partner with them. That's how we do it. We don't get an individual or we talk to someone here. I mean, we can learn from the Irish context, but not so. And Edna, do you think that there is a new vibrancy going on in that partnership way, how we're partnering, because we work for CBM, all right. But one of our key things is that we partner with DPOs. That's it. We don't direct them, but partner them. And can you see that successfully working for the future? Is that the way forward? It is.
Yes, I think it's really the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Working with OPDs and giving them spaces and to indulge in the work that we are doing and to give their perspective in the work we are doing. You see, when you're talking about CRPD, we have also to contextualize it in our local setups. Yeah, so I'm thinking about when you're talking about like what he's talking about reasonable accommodation, what does that mean in our area? What does actually mean to that particular OPD in that remote village? It could mean that you need to bring assistive devices, it means that you need to come with other aids. So I think contextualizing that and, creating that vibrant OPD movement is the way to go, but it has to start from somewhere. We have to work from the roots. What are the challenges? What are the barriers that impede them from, becoming even OPD? Because like in our setup, there are many challenges, like even registering that movement might take a while. So supporting them through that process, it's critical. Looking at the structural barriers at the OPD, the governance issue. Do we need to start doing simple procedures for that OPD to operate, to govern the OPD, the procedures, guidelines for that. Simple. We are not talking about the policies. For us, we go with now, it's a group that has just been formed. So what do we need? We are not saying, you have to create policies like CBM. No, we are saying let's start with, like 1 page, 2 page, something that, and then with time, we can now grow to, steadily. So
capacity building.
Yeah,
capacity building. I mean, that's the thing, is that there's an assumption that straight off you got a group of disabled people together. We're gonna solve all the problems of the world. There has to be localized capacity building for localized solutions. Because there's no point in someone telling someone else how to do it.
Yeah, and we've done that in ILMI. Our capacity worker Fiona Weldon did strategies for change, and that was all about self-empowerment of disabled people and building that capacity, being first of all, being okay with there's an awful lot of internalized ableism and internalized oppression, so that needs to all be, dealt with, or, hashed out, or, people need to understand that for themselves firstly, and then that goes into activism and what can you as a disabled person do when you join a collective.
And you have a huge role. I mean, it is a unique set of resources that ILMI has on their website. They have a huge amount of videos, documentation, that it's all done with authenticity, that anyone can have a look at and see if they go to the website. Thank you, Claire. Do we have time for one really quick question, or do you want?
Yeah, we have Bernadette also has her hand up.
Hi, Bernadette. How are things?
Hi, brilliant. And listen, James, you did a fantastic job, and although easy work because you had 3 amazing speakers.
It was. I did nothing. I'm still half asleep, Bernadette, but fire ahead. Sorry, what?
So a very quick thing. I have about 5 questions, but we'll hopefully we can get people's contacts maybe later. But one quick thing, because I like the way a lot of you brought up different contexts, same issues. And that's been really well illustrated by here. Ireland and Malawi are very different contexts, but very similar issues. And Edna mentioned mental health, and I suppose it's something very dear to my heart. But next week is World Mental Health Day, but of course we know it's 365 days of the year. But I find working for Concern, which is a more mainstream organization, when we talk about disability, I think a lot of my colleagues think of physical disabilities, and they're looking at adaptation, putting in ramps in schools, putting in ramps in the offices, which is great. But how do we move people beyond that? Because I think there's a massive area, and I'm not seeing it in the tools and advices from other INGOs or UN agencies, even in terms of how do we move beyond physical disabilities. Of course, that's key, but the other non-visible are often much harder to understand and alternatively address. So in a nutshell. Hope that makes sense.
Bernard, do you know what I'm going to say there? Because that's a really good question. That's why Claire is here, not just because we have to have the exotic person to learn for it, but that's why Edna is working on it, Bond's working on it, but it's about the focus on single impairments. Isle of May have always been a cross impairment.
Yeah. And we always highlight that accessibility is more than putting in a ramp. It's accessible information. You know, where do we get the information? It's accessible communication, you know, having ISL interpreters, you know, and the closed caption there now, you know, it's like plain English, to have things in plain English. So
Yeah.
by helping one impairment, you're actually encompassing everyone. You're actually making it easier, more accessible for all disabled people and all of society, really, because there's hidden impairments that some people wouldn't want to disclose, or you know.
And I think the thing is too with impairments that we have an idea that if we solve the issue of the impairment, we're somehow going to solve the issue of disability. Disability is not just impairments. I think the thing is that most of the issues of disabled people face, regardless of their impairments, are always really the same. It was what Bon was saying and what Edna was saying. It's about consultation.
Yeah.
It's about like actually been asked from the very beginning, because the issues are usually the same regardless of the impairment. There are forms of discrimination, there are forms of not being included. Context is very different, like you were saying, Edna. Like in you know, when you're out in the villages, it might be you're not gonna have a quiet room. Some people might be able to have even a wheelchair to get outside, or you know, sign language. But it's always the idea is that we'll never solve impairments. That we can change, but we can change the effects of impairments. That's the thing.
Yeah, disability is not our impairments. It's societal attitudes and structural barriers that impair disabled people.
Yeah.
More so than their impairments, because if we highlight those, or you know, take steps to, you know, not fix them but correct them in a way, or understand where we can do better, that will help.
What do you think, Edna?
Yeah, I think it's much more than just creating RAMs and all that. But for us, we have different approaches where we do this, like in programs we have in schools. It's not about just physical infrastructure, but we have like rehabilitative sessions, you know, components that we do in schools, physio, different categories. We are working with a healthcare workforce, you know, to do identification of some of these subtle disability, or that they will not just show like almost immediately. We working with the caregivers or guardians, you know, to be shown how to support these children all through. And so in our mental health project, you know, it's not about only treatment, but there are support services that are required, and by extension, what it's talking about. So yeah, we have all these approaches to ensure that we are not only focusing on physical disability, but also those that are others that are hidden.
Wonderful. And Bon, just to you there, because that's a quite personal question.
Yeah, I think it's as a person, it's a challenge. Because that's why I was saying maybe we haven't reached a level where we have really embraced all the principles of the CRPD. Because for example, I think the question comes from someone from concern. I can be a farmer, but I have albinism. It means I need to have my heart. And then you have somebody with a physical disability, or someone with hearing impairment, or you know, who is vision impairment. Then we can all do farming, but we have our own individual needs that needs to be addressed. For me, that's accessibility. That's reasonable accommodation. So we haven't really, I think, from a programming point of view, to address all those things. So the moment we have a farmer who is on a wheelchair like you, we feel we have addressed people with disabilities. But I cannot do farming because I don't have my heart. I'll get cancer. I can't do anything. So I think we need to move beyond, I think, grouping everyone as equal, and then try to address. Because from a programming point of view, I've also seen some daughters now, if I start demanding my heart, they will think I'm more expensive than somebody on a wheelchair. You know? So you still try now to address with attitudes of those now try. So capacity building, even at policy level, is very important. People should understand the diverse needs of people with disability, and then provide specific and unique needs as well in the process of accessibility and accommodating them in different programs.
And the best people to talk about that
It's
to
ourselves.
is ourselves. It's
Yeah.
disabled people's movements, collective disabled people's movements, which in turn will help international development, international INGOs, partners, whatever stakeholders have a healthier, active, and I say healthier, I don't mean like physically healthier, I mean just in general, and a more democratic partnership with development. I think, are we okay with questions?
Yeah, we're just at 25.
We're 25.
So.
Guys, I want to say thank you so much to everybody today. This was the first time I think Dóchas has done this, but it's been an absolute credit. And thank you so much to Dóchas and to Leah and Gillian and Jane and Simon and everyone that's taken part, and Lauren and above that have done this. And I wanted to thank to Edna, who's come all the way from Kenya, not for this, we don't have that budget. Bonface, who's came from Malawi, and Claire, that's came all the way from Longford. I just want to finish on that this is the start of a conversation. We can have another one again. Partnership means being partners with people. I think everyone knows what we need to do. We need to move away from a very binary thinking of disability to a more holistic one. And I'd like to thank you today. And you know, we can share the recording afterwards, and you'll be able to get the emails. You want to check out Standing Voice, CBM, or you want to check out islami.ie, and go for it. To finish on, I just want to really reiterate what Bon said. You know, we know what partnership, we know what it is in our heads, but we have to translate that to our hearts. And that's what we really need to do. We need to bring co-collaboration, co-implementation right to the way we're doing things, because that will be the way that we bring people along. So thank you so much, everybody, and we really appreciate you being here today, and we hope you have a great weekend. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.